to start off by telling you all a story. 7 years ago, I was getting my PhD at the University of Miami in Florida, and I was studying coral reefs in Florida. And I had just gotten this underwater camera, and so I wanted to make a film about the coral reefs that I was studying. So I made the film, and then afterwards I went to my local bar, and I was like, can I do a little screening here? And they were like, sure. And they were like, how many chairs do you need? And I was like, I don't, like 20, maybe 30. It was my first film ever. No one knew who I was. I was like, it'll be me, my friends, and the local drunks. That night, more than 100 people showed up. And this should be a video that's playing. So maybe we can try to figure that out in the meantime while I continue. But I stood there on stage after the film screen, answering question after question about coral reefs. And I was like, wait a second, people really care about this stuff. And that was when I realized that the biggest challenge that was facing our oceans wasn't apathy, it was disconnection. And I decided that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life analyzing data and being an academic. I wanted to bridge that gap. I wanted to be a storyteller. Since then, I've taken my camera underwater to oceans all over the world, telling stories that inspire people to act on behalf of our oceans. It's what makes my heart sing. But before I go on, I want to answer a question that a lot of you might have right now, which is, how did a Middle Eastern girl from the California suburbs end up becoming an ocean explorer? Well, I was born doing this. I'm just kidding, we just had a really weird family vacation. And that hairdo did not age well. My parents were Iranian immigrants. So like any other immigrant kid, I thought that if I wanted to be successful, I had to be an engineer, a doctor, a scientist doctor. This is me in my training to do just that. But my parents also taught me other things. My mom taught me her obsession with water, especially the cold kind of water. She could never resist the temptation to jump in, and I always followed her. And my dad would read me Persian poetry, and he would teach me about the values and the philosophies of the ancient Persian poets. A love for nature as the ultimate teacher, and the belief that anything we do with our lives should be in the service of others. So, in the end, I decided I would rebel against the expectations of my culture. Just kidding, I became a doctor. Well, kinda. I got my doctorate in marine science, which, as it turns out, is the lowest paying doctorate you can get. But I was happy because it meant that I got to go to these incredible places all around the world and learn about people's relationships with the ocean. And while I was on these field trips, I started to bring my camera with me because I really wanted to be able to capture what I was seeing and show it to my family and friends. I wanted them to feel what I got to feel. But I couldn't really afford the gear to capture what I was seeing underwater. So I applied for a National Geographic Young Explorers grant. To my surprise, I got the grant, and I spent all the money immediately on an underwater camera. That camera became my bridge between science and storytelling. It allowed me to make my first short film, which is the one that I screened at that bar that night. And it helped me see that humans aren't designed to respond to numbers or even facts, as Tom was saying. We are designed by evolution to respond to stories. Stories are what drive us to remember, to empathize, and to act. So now, my mission is to tell stories that are rooted in science, but also driven by emotion. With my company, Light Palace Productions, based out of Miami, I build female-led production teams that help scientists, governments, and organizations tell powerful stories about our oceans. In 2023, we produced a film about Bermuda's climate and ocean innovations It was a 360 immersive experience that we held at COP28 in Dubai. And the film really positioned Bermuda as this leader in ocean and climate solutions to a global audience. On the island of Moorea in French Polynesia, I worked with local scientists and educators to tell the story of this really cool and unique freshwater coral reef system. This freshwater bubbles up from underground springs underneath the sea onto these coral reefs. That shimmering effect you're seeing is the freshwater entering the saltwater and having that density difference. We wanted to tell this story to inspire lawmakers on the island to enforce protections that were already in place for this fragile freshwater ecosystem. I took this image to drive the point home visually. You can tell someone that pollution gets into freshwater streams and then bubbles up onto coral reefs and kills them, or you can just show them, and they understand it in an instant. Last year, I brought that same approach to the Egyptian Red Sea, where we were tasked with making a 360 immersive film about coral reef conservation. But there's just one problem with that. How do you get people to care about corals? They don't move, they don't talk, they don't have faces. Most people think they're plants. They're not plants, they're animals. And they're not charismatic. So we decided to tell the story through something that everyone does care about. Dolphins. When we got on to Egypt, we met with marine biologist Dr. Angela Ziltner. She's been studying a resident population of dolphins in Egypt for many years. There's 350 of these dolphins. She knows most of them by name, just by the markings on their dorsal fins. And we spent every day in the water with the dolphins. And as we did that, I saw that these dolphins weren't just randomly moving around. They were lining up and taking turns and rubbing their bodies on these corals. Dr. Ziltner and her colleagues believe that they're using the coral's antimicrobial mucus to keep their skin healthy. They're basically giving themselves a spa day, which, like, come on, so bougie. but for us, the dolphins were also a storytelling strategy. By following them and shaping the narrative around their story, we could get audiences to care about the corals, which were the real heroes that are shaping and supporting this whole ecosystem. That film is now showing in aquariums and zoos all around the world, helping people see why it's important to consider coral reefs. And finally, I'd like to tell you about my most illustrious work, the kind I put on social media. This one starts out with, corals in Florida are having sex. It's embarrassing, but it works. We cannot deny that some of the most impactful storytelling happening these days isn't on the screen that's big and fancy, it's on the screen in your hand. Most of the social media work that I've done has been in my home in Florida. And for this piece, I collaborated with the Coral Restoration Foundation in the Florida Keys to tell the story about the really innovative and high-tech work that they're doing with sexual restoration on those reefs. Our coral reefs in Florida have gone functionally extinct, which means that we don't have enough coral out there for them to reproduce on their own anymore. So these scientists are giving them a helping hand. They wait until the full moon in August. They go out, they collect when the spawn of the corals, when they do spawn. And then they take these spawn back to the lab, grow them into little coral babies. Sometimes they put those corals back on the reef to enhance the genetic diversity of the reef. And then sometimes they go full Jurassic Park and they put those corals in the freezer and basically biobank those corals in a kind of coral ark so that we can preserve that genetic diversity in the case that the ocean becomes fully inhospitable to corals. And we could one day down the line, when temperatures cool down, reseed those reefs and rebuild them. Making this science accessible on social media led to much more awareness for CRF's work, Coral Restoration Foundation's work, and it also added a lot of recruits to their interns and volunteer programs. Last year, the state of Florida proposed a plan to let developers build luxury resorts and golf courses on public state parks. I was part of a wave of conservationists who used social media to advocate against this project. I made a short video breaking it down. It went viral, adding to the public outrage that helped shut down the project for good. Afterwards, the governor said that he didn't even know the plan existed, which is how you know the backlash was big. We were really proud of that effort. And then this last case, it didn't take me very far, just 500 feet from my own local beach in South Beach. We have our own coral reef there, and it's a reef that most people didn't even know existed. And because of that, it was seeing a lot of damage from boat anchors and pollution, and so I teamed up with a team of local conservationists and storytellers to change that. I took this video on the reef and we shared it on social media, inviting the community to come to a town hall to advocate for the reef's protection. We had a really good turnout. The room was packed. The mayor was there. He was shaking hands, kissing babies. And the response was unanimous. We want our reef to be protected. And just last month, after months of advocacy, the city of Miami Beach just approved funding for the creation of the Miami Beach Marine Park. I'm really proud of our team for that work. And in a time when it feels like one loss after another for the oceans, it's work like this, work that's local and achievable, that gives me the motivation to keep going. For my latest and most ambitious project, I'm building on all this work to create a digital series profiling ocean-based solutions around the world. And the point of the series is to show why the ocean is our greatest ally in our fight for against climate change, for a climate resilient future. And in this series, which is funded by National Geographic and Builders Vision, I visit communities and scientists around the world who are restoring reefs, protecting fisheries, rebuilding coastal economies, restoring mangroves. And I know a lot of people in this room know about projects like that. So if you have an idea, please let me know. We're always looking for more stories. And I'm focusing on these incredible solutions because at this point we know that people don't care about or act on issues. People aren't inspired by issues. They're inspired by seeing people out there doing actual real things in the world. And that's what's so exciting about this, is that these solutions that these people are working on, that so many of you are working on, are already working. They're just waiting to be scaled. This series is called Blueprint because each solution helps chart our path to a livable future. Blending science, ancient wisdom, and emotion is the challenge that I face every day in my work. But it's also the same challenge we all face in this age as humans together. How do we reconnect in a world that keeps pulling us apart? How do we hold our heartbreak for the world and still find the motivation to keep fighting for it? I see my work as a practice in reconnection, in reconnecting us to each other and to the natural world. And to remind us that action is the antidote to anxiety, and it's our clearest path to hope. And when I say hope, I don't mean the hope that things will turn out the way we want them to. I've already given up on that, I think we all have. But the kind of hope that reminds us that what we do now still matters. Because the greatest challenge was never apathy, it was disconnection. And every act of connection, big or small, brings us closer to the world that we're fighting for. Thank you.